Good afternoon, everyone, on a beautiful day in Delco Village. Thank you for joining us for this broadcast of the HOA POA Board Candidates Forum. My name is Ken Litke, and I'm the president of the Homeowners Association of Delco Village, who is your host for this event tonight, this afternoon. For this forum, I will also serve as a moderator, as a forum moderator. Now, normally we hold these forums at the community church, which can accommodate a large audience. This year with COVID, we've had to make other arrangements. So we are holding this forum on the upper floor of the yacht club with limited attendance. It's basically the participants and their invited guests. However, courtesy of the fine team at Delco Village Broadcasting, we are live streaming and recording this event, so you at home are able to virtually attend this meeting. We also have a number of homeowners viewing live on the lower floor of the yacht club. We at HOA wish that we all could be together in person, but we feel this is a good and safe alternative in these trying times. Keep going. Okay. So what is our goal for this forum? This forum is but one part, albeit important, part of our HOA advocacy effort to help our membership make informed decisions. Hopefully, at the conclusion of this forum today, you will be better prepared to make an informed vote in the upcoming POA elections. As you'll hear shortly, the POA board plays an enormous role in preserving and increasing home values, promoting an ever-improving quality of life, and growing and keeping our community financially sound. So here's the agenda for today's meeting. I'm doing the welcome and overview right now. Soon we'll ask Mitzi Lane, the COO, to come up and talk about the board responsibilities and expectations. Then the candidates will do a self-introduction of themselves. And then we'll get to the heart of the meeting. I'll be asking prepared questions to each of the candidates. We will also be getting questions from the audience, and more on that in just a moment. And then we will finally allow a summation by each candidate before closing the meeting. So, where did the list of questions to be asked today come from? Well, the HOA reached out and solicited input from our HOA membership as well as from the HOA board members. And we received over 75 questions. And then the members of the board boiled these questions down, these 75 questions, into 9 categories, reducing redundancy and focusing on key issues to villagers. The candidates were then provided the questions in advance to help them prepare for this meeting. How can you at home submit questions? All online and on-site attendees can submit questions via the chat function on the TVB YouTube channel. As moderator, I will review the questions that come through on chat and ask them at the end of the prepared questions as time allows. If we do run out of time, HOA will still get answers to your questions. We will capture all the unanswered questions. We will review these questions and submit them to the candidates asking for written responses. And then HOA will post these, the unanswered questions and candidate responses on the HOA website. So if we don't get to your question, we will later on. Some simple guidelines for submitting questions. Ask questions. Don't express opinions. Focus on issues that have broad interest. Avoid individual or small group issues. Asking questions of a personal nature, or questions that are very complex or require a complex or lengthy response. We're back. Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to just acknowledge this couldn't be possible, this forum today, without the help of a lot of different groups, and we've listed the different groups up there. At the risk of singling someone out, a group out, I would like to thank Dennis Doherty for leading from the HOA side, and Kevin Critch leading his team from the Tellico Village Broadcasting. So thank you to all these people. Okay, and now I'd like to ask Mitzi to come forward, Chief Operating Officer at POA, and briefly speak about the POA board and why these elected positions are so important to all of us.
Thank you, Ken. I will wait on the clicker. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the HOA. Thank you to TVB for working so hard, I think probably most of the day today, to prepare this room and get everything set up. And thank you to our candidates today. I know how busy it is, especially this time of year. We're looking out the window at all these boats that are out there right now, so I know how hard it is. Before I get into these list of responsibilities and expectations, I just wanted to share a couple of my favorite characteristics of an outstanding board member. And these are just characteristics that I've picked up over the years. I have worked here at Tellico Village since 2004, so I've had the privilege of working with many different types of people. But one of the number one characteristics of a good board member is their accountability, which for me, it's just their eagerness to participate at every meeting. They're well prepared. A lot of times, there's a lot of preparation that takes place behind the scenes by the board and a lot of reading materials that we have to provide to each of you. And so, that really helps us when you come to a board meeting and you're well prepared. Also a board member who sees the big picture view. They view the mission through a strategic and not an operational lens. In addition, they have the courage to set direction to achieve the organization's mission. One final thing that, just another personal characteristic that I like to see in a board member is just the discretion. They know how to maintain the confidentiality of the board discussions, and they speak with one voice when representing the organization to the community. And now I'd like to get into this list. This list was actually approved by the board in November of 2005. We actually amended this list of responsibilities in 2012 by adding one final bullet. But we use this list in board orientations and a board reference manual that our board members get. So our current board members are very familiar with this. And we'll go through these fairly quickly. Some of them I would like to talk about in detail, and some of them we'll just skip through fairly quickly. But we exercise all corporate and legal power necessary to manage and direct the affairs of the corporation. Develop strategic direction. They do work with the Long Range Planning Committee on the development of the renewal of the Long Range Strategic Vision. Review and keep updated the organization's vision, mission, core values, and guiding principles. Most of you know that in 2019, the Long Range Planning Committee, along with the Board of Directors, actually updated and amended the vision statement. So one of the 2020 goals of the Board of Directors this year was to actually amend and update the remainder of what is our vision, mission, core values, and guiding principles. And that was actually approved at the October 7th board meeting. So it's a very recent objective that they just got through. They do approve the general manager's goals and objectives and monitor his performance. That's done sometimes on a monthly basis at the board meetings, sometimes it may be quarterly. They review and sign legal documents as required by policy and the bylaws, hire, direct, and review the performance of the general manager, exercise legal and fiduciary responsibilities per the POA's governing documents and applicable laws. They finalize and approve annual budgets, 10-year plans, annual assessments, and user fees. As most of you know, we've been in these budget meetings now going on a month, and we actually have 2 more coming up next week on Monday and Tuesday. I feel like we are getting closer to achieving the 2021 budget and the 10-year plan. Next set of slides here, approve expenditures per policy. They appoint all members to the committees of the POA in accordance with the POA's charter and bylaws and the committee charters. Just to throw a little plug in right now, typically our deadline for accepting committee applications is October 1st. However, we still have time if there are any viewers out there that are interested in sitting in on a committee, an advisory committee. we welcome you to go ahead and bring those applications in. It's not too late. The new committee members will actually be appointed in January by the board members. The board members also encourage new candidates to run for the board, to serve on committees, appoint replacement members for interim openings on the board. They serve as a court of appeal by POA member disputes and appeals from ACC decisions. They serve as liaison to committees. So not only do board members attend 2 board meetings a month, they are also asked to attend committee meetings as liaisons and then come back to board meetings and report what each committee has going on, whether it be projects or issues that need solutions. They approve all POA board rules and policies, encourage feedback from members. Another recent initiative that was taken on by HOA, POA, was a new help desk system that we have online. It's a ticketing system, and it's been a great way for us as the management team and staff to get feedback from property owners. Establish key measures for success. They communicate to our members. And finally, for number 20, instill a culture of continuous improvement within the POA board, committee structure, and staff. This one is the one that I mentioned that was actually added in 2012. At that time, the board felt that it was their responsibility and expectation as a board member, as well as staff, to look at continuing improvement ideas, POA, committee structure, and the staff. So in closing, as a board member, you need to fully understand, and value the impact that you make in our community. Volunteering is one of the most admirable things a person can do for their community, and your willingness to consider dedicating countless hours of valuable time to positively impact your community is inspirational. I know the hours that you all work as board members, and we commend you for that. As staff members, we couldn't do it without you, so I thank you. Just for our viewers at home, to let you know, this is a non-compensated volunteer role that these board members take on for your community, and we appreciate every one of them. So with that being said, I will turn it back over to the HOA.
Thanks, Mitzi. Just want to say from the HOA viewpoint too, the hours they work is amazing to me. I email them, call them all times a day, night, and very responsive to me, and I very much appreciate it. I don't know how they find time to do anything else besides what they do, so very much appreciated from our part as well. Okay, now it's time to hear from the candidates. Okay, so we have Pat White. Pat White is going to be leading off. They drew earlier for starting positions, and then it'll be Mike Blackwell.
I'm just going to read.
And then lastly up will be Rick doing the self-introduction. So with that said, you're up.
I'm up. Okay, well, thank you. And welcome to all those folks that are viewing, and I was explaining hordes downstairs and everybody else that's going to watch in the future. But I'm a 68-year-old, 13-year resident of Tellico Village. I've served on the Men's Golf Association Board, Golf Advisory Committee, and I'm currently serving my first term on the POA board. During my board time, I've served as liaison to the Tellico Village Townhouse Association, Recreation Advisory Committee, Long Range Planning, Government Affairs, and Marina Advisory Committee. My first action during this term was to change the advisory committee charters to allow non-committee members to serve on ad hoc committees, thus allowing a community perspective and requiring department managers to present advisory committee recommendation for board approval prior to a board vote. Tellico Village will be facing decisions that will set the tone for the future. We have been a community of overdeveloped amenities with an underpopulated support base. We're quickly witnessing the effects of that equalization. The future will require property owners to make a choice of convenience or cost, since each of our facilities has been landlocked by the original developer. Whether a parking lot or facility expansion will be very expensive. Tellico Village has been presented with a learning opportunity during the COVID-19 pandemic. The planning and implementation of compliance regulations while maintaining our social fabric has been an eye-opening experience. Implementation of online scheduling, video conferencing, as we're doing today, social distancing, and participation limitations have proven that as a community, we can and will overcome all obstacles. Tellico Village must incorporate these experiences while continuing to improve communications with all property owners. Done. She's not going to throw that thing on me.
That's the fastest I've ever seen you answer something, Pat.
Yeah, actually, Pat, I'm shocked.
Hooray for me.
All right. So, okay, thank you. So the next up would be Mike Blackwell.
It would be. Thank you, Kent. Oops, there we go. So, first of all, I want to welcome everybody who's viewing, all of our friends, neighbors, and fellow Tellico villagers. I want to thank the HOA for putting on this forum and giving all of us the opportunity to come and speak to our constituents or prospective constituents. And I want to thank TVB for handling all the technology, because I know that's a lot to juggle. Anyways, thrilled to be here. My name is Mike Blackwell. I moved to Tellico Village about 2.5 years ago. I can tell you right off the top that I have 3 core values, and that's, as you know, is part of mission. They are honesty, integrity, and transparency. And those are values that I will hold true if I'm elected as a member of the POA board throughout the term of office. So my wife and I came here in May of 2018 from Rochester, New York. I have a daughter-in-law who lives in Charlotte who graduated from UT. We had vacationed here a number of times and enjoyed the area. We wanted to get out of the snow and the cold and away from the high taxes, and we just fell in love with Tellico when we visited. And for me, I'm kind of a golf addict. The 3 golf courses sealed the deal. So we came down here, rented for a year, and built our home in Malacqua. Between us, we have 5 sons, ages 42 to 25. We have 6 grandchildren. The oldest is 14, and the youngest is 5 months. So we enjoy being in closer proximity to them and having the opportunity to spend time together. Want to advance that for me? Thank you. My educational background, I have a bachelor's degree in business administration from a small Christian liberal arts school in upstate New York, Houghton College. And then I did my master's degree in education at St. Bonaventure University in the southern tier of New York. A little career background for me. Since I don't have the advantage of telling you like these gentlemen do what I have done on the POA board, I'll tell you what my capabilities are and what I can do. Career background, I was a career educator. I taught high school business for over 30 years. Among the subjects that I taught were business law, advanced accounting, personal financial management. Yes, they do teach that to kids in high school, some places. I also taught marketing, and there were a handful of other courses over the span of 30 years. I was an adjunct professor at our local State University of New York Community College. And then I also spent 40 years, 20 in high school and 20 in college, coaching boys and men's basketball. While I was doing that, I was very fortunate to be with a great mentor at the University of Rochester. In 1990, we won a national championship. I coached in an Empire State Games Olympic-style competition for 10 years. Had some really great accomplishments, and that was a real test of leadership to be able to deal with those diverse kids. Next one. My qualifications. I have a pretty deep business background with my degree and my experience in the classroom. I have leadership skills, communication skills, leadership experience, which I'll share with you later, and I have technology skills. I'm certified by Microsoft in all 4 components of Office Suite. Outside leadership, I'm the founder of what came to be known as the West Side Relay for Life outside of Rochester. Over a 10-year period, we raised more than $1 million. I was also involved with Initiative for Coaches versus Cancer. I was nominated for the Cancer Society's Champion Award, which is a national award. Normally nominations aren't a big deal, but there were only 4 of us, myself, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, and Mike Krzyzewski, so I was in pretty good company. I was the department chair of our business department, the school where I taught for 9 years, twice a New York State Department of the Year, and I participated in our strategic planning initiative in that school district. In Tellico Village, I'm president currently of the New Villagers. I serve on the MGA Board of Directors as their secretary. I was involved with the Recreational Amenities Focus Group for the long-range planning. I founded the TV Coalition for Builder Accountability. We help folks who are building homes in Tellico Village resolve their issues with their builders. And then I organized the Tellico Village Honors Veterans Program for reefs across America. Just a couple of things that I'd like to see change here. Greater emphasis on all property owners, resident and non-resident. Greater accountability, obviously, for all the builders in Tellico. Improving our relationships with our constituents and our local government entities. And I'd like to see a geographic representation on the POA board. I think I'm the only one in the mix from Milwaukee.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And now it's time for Rick Blau.
You'll pardon me, but I speak better standing up. And I'm not Missy. You ready? 3 years ago, I spoke to you about the Tellico Village brand and the social fabric that attracted us and binds us as a community. I told you that it was the board's job to protect that brand and in the process our property values. I pledged to run the POA like a business, meaning fiscal management emphasizing strategic planning, sensible budgets, reserve accumulation, and a conservative approach to debt. Business plans that pass the test of rigorous needs and competitive analysis. Open lines of communication producing transparency in operations and decision-making, and engaging all property owners with management and problem solving. I've sat on corporate boards and been in the business of managing turnarounds. From that experience, I know that the boards of successful companies have a lot in common. They have vision. They formulate strategies and set both long and short-term goals. They evaluate management performance and assure proper execution of the strategic business plan. They are transparent in their operation and strive for stakeholder buy-in. They do not run the day-to-day business. That's management's job, and the board is there to hold management accountable. 3 years ago, I told you I'd bring this business-oriented philosophy to the board. My every action as a board member and as its current president has been with that in mind. During my tenure, I have focused on what I told you I would do. Financially, Tellico Village is in a stronger position than it ever has been, even given the stress created by COVID-19. We lengthened our planning cycle to 11 years from 6. We have decreased our debt load in service. We are rebuilding our reserves after new and needed amenity investments in 2019. We've made significant strides in board transparency and our overall communications efforts by introducing live streaming of board meetings, a communications policy driving all POA communications through a central point to ensure consistency, a crisis communications plan, which I activated when COVID hit us, and improvements in the Telegram, which is the POA's primary communications vehicle. We've engaged in studies to give us a truer picture of where we stand and where we need to go. The road study allowed us to formulate a maintenance plan for the next 15 years, save money, and spread out spending. The water and sewer study revealed that our systems are adequate to address the village's needs through build-out. The recreation long-range study gave us a plan for the future of that resource. The new long-range strategic plan was adopted that gives us a blueprint for the next 30 years. 3 years ago, I criticized the POA for its lack of preparation for the future. During my tenure, I've worked extensively on organization development and succession planning to assure that we are ready for that future. I also said that we needed alternative sources of funding to build amenities to maintain our competitive edge. Using private funding, we built the Kahiti Clubhouse portico and provided exercise stations on the Wellness Center walking trail. In 2018, I worked on the Timeless Tellico Foundation's charter, which is being used to fund projects through tax-free donations like the TOC injury assessments and the new pickleball complex. We now have a new residential construction handbook, ensuring enforceability, addressing drainage issues, and providing a framework for the development of environmental recommendations. For 2 years, we've been in negotiations for a new water services agreement with LUB, providing for our needs while establishing firm performance criteria. Board approval of that 20-year agreement is great news for Tellico Village. Even better is that we avoid spending $1.2 million to build a tank, and you can use those dollars for other POA needs. My efforts as a board member include me being an attorney. And I know most people don't like attorneys. I've been in a unique position to provide oversight of the POA's legal affairs. My time on the board has been driven by one principle: providing a solid future for Tellico Village. However, 2020 dealt the board a curveball. It gave us a global pandemic. As board president, it became my job to lead us through this. We were driven by two principles: protect our vulnerable population and avoid potential liability by operating within the state's guidance, even though it was confusing and cumbersome. The contingency plans that we put in place when COVID hit us and the actions that we have taken since have served us well. It is likely that we will emerge from this stronger than ever. This is what a board is charged with doing: addressing the organization's future and leading it through a crisis. If you re-elect me, I will continue to provide leadership and focus on what is to come in Tellico Village. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the candidates for their self-introductions and keeping to the timetable. Now we'll get to the main reason for this meeting, posing questions to the candidates and getting their responses on issues of importance to the future of our village. And before we do that, a couple housekeeping rules on how this will work. As moderator, I will read the full question area, and then each candidate will have allowed the same amount of time to answer, which will vary by question. I will not reread each question between candidates if they have been provided the questions in advance. This is not a debate, but if a candidate feels a statement was made that requires a response, they can ask for time, which I grant, assuming I feel this is warranted. Okay. So the questions were being given to candidates were grouped into 9 categories as being displayed right now. Quality of candidates, leadership style, quality of life, succession planning, environment quality, Asian carp, COVID-19, subsidies, and new amenities. And I'm sure sitting out in the audience you can realize that most of these are very hot topics, very important topics to all villagers. So now I will read the first question for which each candidate will have 5 minutes to respond. And we will start off with Pat.
Okay.
Again, then we'll rotate as
Okay.
I said earlier, we'll rotate. So I'll read the question now. What capabilities do you bring to the POA board that will help its ability to function? For example, skills, abilities, competencies, proven experience. In the role you're now completing, POA board New Villager president, what has been your most significant accomplishments in 2020 or during your term? What was the biggest challenge, and how did you demonstrate leadership in solving the problem? And for Rick and Pat, since they're running for re-election only, what did you not accomplish in your term that you want to accomplish in your second term? So,
Go, huh? Okay. Significant accomplishments. As I stated in the introduction, one of the first things out of the blocks was changing the advisory committee charter through the board to allow non-advisory committee members or the general public to participate in those decisions. My thought was like-minded plans will generate like-minded results, so I thought that it was very good to have an alternate property owner point of view. I was a strong supporter of rewriting the purchasing and procurement policies and procedures. Though our POA operated within guidelines through the years, we developed a system that at times appeared incorrect. In 35 years, we've transitioned from being a medium-sized neighborhood to being a multi-million-dollar community. Our purchasing and procurement procedures had to change. We must continue to fine-tune these through procedures in the future. The small I'm sorry, I missed that. As we grow, the number of prime buildable lots declines, and while many great buildable lots remain, the effects of adding homes on those lots has generated a significant impact to the surrounding property owners. The management of our ACC rules and regulations has not kept pace with the development. And through great efforts by the ACC volunteer members, and as Rick said, Rick's guiding and leadership, the Blue Book was updated to current standards. But without inspection and enforcement, we have no way of knowing the Blue Book is actually being followed. So I was involved in the proposal and passage by the board adding 2 additional inspectors in 2020 with an additional 3 more inspectors to be planned for 2021 pending justifications of those additions, and requiring all new homes built to have a documented, engineered drainage and runoff plan that spans the building process from initial lot preparation to final landscaping plan and implementation. Along with Mike Colacone, former board member, I formed a golf ad hoc committee made up of golfer and non-golfer property owners, researching and recommending changes to our golf operation regarding rounds, revenue, and yield. The result of this committee's efforts was to enact an after 2 p.m. program in order to provide greater member value, fill the 80% underutilization of our courses in the afternoon, and change the culture of Tellico Village golfers from primary AM culture to an all-day golf culture. The program also eliminated seasonal pricing and removed our golf operations from contracted regional traveling golf groups, which in effect took over our course and only generated less than 50 rounds. Improved marketing to non-traditional golfers by implementing events such as taco truck putt-putt, wine and cheese events, evening golf, and etc., which should resume after COVID restrictions. The effort was to grow the game and attract fun-loving villagers to an outside activity. And as a note, because we had no idea this was coming, though some of the events have been dropped due to COVID, our golf staff and advisory committee has continued this approach with the results being record-setting. And through working with the long-range planning advisory committee, developed a program that would allow property owners to make online reservations for rooms and other manually reserved amenities. Lucky us that we had this in place when COVID arrived. We were working to resolve the adversarial relationship between our county governments, TRDA, and the POA. This is a critical issue moving forward. Our strategy for the past 35 years has not yielded satisfactory results, and we must change this as a board. Challenging the POA to be more actively involved in social media and in-house communications to property owners. And though I've developed a reputation on the board as being a chatty Cathy, you'll note that the chatty parts of my conversation have been to explain the why of the decisions being made. Being open and informative is critical as a board member, but just as important is explaining why. Now, what I did not accomplish. Tellico Village is rapidly growing higher than average property tax, lower use property tax community. And this is in with respect to jail usage. We don't have a lot of villagers using the new jail. Our judicial system usage and county-supported infrastructure usage. We're the best fully supporting, tax-generating, resident-involved, generating over $2 million in volunteer dollars per year and not counting the hours. In effect, we are the goose that laid the golden egg. While we rightly demand accountability for every single assessment dollar spent by us, the property owner, we pay a very similar amount in property taxes expecting no zero accountability. This must change. Our strategy for the past 2 decades has been effective. Done.
Okay. Move to Mike.
Okay, thanks, Ken. With regard to qualities that I might possess for this position, I've been in a lot of different leadership roles. I mentioned to you that I was a classroom teacher and a department chair for a business department which was one of the largest in New York State. We were the model department for the state for the 9 years that I was fortunate enough to be at the helm, and we were twice awarded and recognized by State Education Department as the Business Department of the Year in the state. I've had an opportunity to coach, as I said, for 40 years and had great levels of success with that, primarily because I fell under the guidance and tutelage of some very good mentors, and I was smart enough to listen to what they had to say and employ some of those principles and concepts. I've also been involved in a lot of different community activities, both before I came to Tellico Village and since I came here. I mentioned to you my work with the American Cancer Society. Most people get involved with an initiative like that because they have in some way been touched closely by cancer in their family. That was not the case with me. I believe that we all have a moral and ethical responsibility to try and make the community in which we live better than where we found it. And as a teacher and a coach, I tried to convey that message to my students and my athletes. So the two initiatives that I led with the Cancer Society was my way of getting my students and players involved with something in the community that was bigger than them and would add value. It was a way for them to give back. And I'm proud that those initiatives were really quite successful. Since I came to Tellico Village, I have been involved again because I believe I have to, give back to my community. I encountered some difficulties with my builder. My wife and I built a home in Malacqua. In being out among our peers in the village, talking with new villagers, talking with folks I golf with, talking with folks in the restaurant, I found there were others who had problems with their builders. And the more I talked, the more I found out that, the problems were very similar. So I convened a group of homeowners in Tellico Village who had similar problems with their builder, gave them an opportunity to share those experiences. And when they did that, they all kind of found out, we've all got the same problems. So we took those issues to the ACC. We took those issues to the POA through the marketing team, and we're not able to get resolution. So we took matters into our own hands. I used my background in teaching law, in teaching financial management, in teaching business and contracts, to get these folks to band together, suggested to them some courses of action that they could take. We went through a bunch of courses of action, some of which were not successful. We finally found one that was. And those people in our coalition, and there were about 12 families, I want to say there are 4 or 5 families who decided to take the steps that we recommended, got all of their issues resolved by their builder at no cost to them out of their pocket. Today, I probably get at least 1 call a week from someone in Tellico Village that says, Mr. Blackwell, I heard that you can help me resolve an issue with my builder, and I'm more than happy to be able to do that. There's no cost to it. It's just a way to give back to the community. And I'd like to see the things that happened to some of us who had issues not happen to those who will follow us to Tellico Village. And I hope there will be a great many of those to come. So that's just some of my leadership experience. I hope I can bring those items to bear in a position on the POA board. If my friends, neighbors, and fellow villagers are so inclined to vote me into that position. Thanks.
Okay, time for Rick.
Okay. My capabilities. I'm a lawyer with an MBA in finance and an undergrad degree in industrial management with concentrations in human resources and finance. I've worked for over 30 years in the auto industry and in private equity, specializing in turnaround and change management. Over 20 of those years were spent in management and senior executive positions. I have served on the boards of several companies and charitable organizations. My experiences ranged from machine tool design, purchasing, and systems analysis to legal, M&A, human resources and labor relations, and government and public relations. I'm a skilled negotiator with strong communication skills. I listen to the opinions of others and have the ability to find common ground and forge win-win solutions to problems. I pride myself in having the financial acumen to develop sound budgets and long-range strategic business plans. I've worked to hone my teaming skills and always seek to find compromises and build coalitions. In 3 years, there have been a lot of accomplishments. But let me preface this answer with this. No board member acts alone. Everything that the board accomplishes are the actions of a focused team. Given that, here are some of the things that the board has done in the last 3 years. Our financial planning focus has gone from 6 to 11 years. We built the Tokwa Clubhouse and Kahiti Activity Center. We have conducted studies of our roads and our water and sewer systems. We have negotiated a new 20-year water services agreement with LUB with firm performance standards, consequences, and infrastructure improvements. As a result, we no longer need to spend $1.2 million for a tank, and we can use that for other POA needs. We have a new long-range strategic plan, a blueprint for the next 30 years. We have increased board transparency by introducing live streaming and improving all of our communications policies and vehicles. We are rebuilding our reserves with an eye towards 30% of our asset value in reserves by 2025 or 6. We've developed a new blue book and addressed drainage issues in the process. The Timeless Teleco Foundation was developed to provide alternative funding sources for amenities. We've stepped up our lobbying efforts and chartered a new government affairs advisory group. We've established an Asian carp committee and are pursuing strategies to involve the village in solving this problem. We've involved villagers and found solutions for the dog park and for the Tugaloo Family Park. I could go on, but you get the idea. This has been a very busy board. My biggest challenges are two. I've been heavily involved in organizational development and succession planning. Given my background, I have specialized skills in this area and am an experienced executive level recruiter. Part of this process is to develop internal resources and to identify what is needed in future leadership for the village. The second is COVID-19. I often joke with fellow board members that 2020 was not the right year to be board president. It fell to me to lead the board in developing contingency plans to help them understand and react to government edicts that were often cumbersome and confusing, and to communicate developments to villagers. And then there's the extra question that you asked me: what didn't I accomplish that I set out to do 3 years ago? When I campaigned 3 years ago, I said the POA is a business and needs to run like a business. I have not changed my opinion. And it's what has driven my efforts for 3 years and will drive my efforts if you reelect me. I believe that we have made major strides in fiscal management, communications, board transparency, and planning for the future of the village. I also believe that we are never done and that we can always get better.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the next question, which will be in leadership style. And the first question will go to Mike. It's 3 minutes response from each of you, maximum. I'll read the question now. POA board members represent all residents and property owners of the village. By what specific methods do you use or plan to use to obtain the voice of the village on important issues, acknowledging that some voices speak louder than others, so getting a balanced viewpoint may be difficult? If the majority view differs from your personal viewpoint, how will you manage it? That's a question.
Okay, thanks, Ken. It was a terrific segue that Rick happened to mention the role of the POA board as a team. As I've told you already, I have extensive and successful experience being a team leader and manager. So this kind of feeds right into this question about leadership style. And I've tried to use those same skills in my challenging year of 2020, in my role as president of New Villagers. A team is only successful if everyone is rowing in the same direction. And, you know, I've had success with wins and losses on the basketball court. I'm fond of saying that anybody can do the X and O part of the game, but the folks who are really successful are the ones who are best able to manage the personalities and the personnel who are involved. So I pride myself on being a direction provider, being highly organized, being an effective communicator, but making sure that every member of the team feels valued and appreciated and feels like they make a contribution to the overall success of the group. None of us can do that job alone. It's a really big job being on the POA board, and one that I'm excited to have an opportunity to contend for. Rick's job is important. Pat's job is important. Marty Inkrot's job is important. Everybody's job. Sue's job is important. Everybody's job is important. But no one of those folks is more important than all of them. It takes those folks all working together. When I get elected to a position, I don't represent me. I represent you, the people who put me in that position. So even though I may have a personal opinion that differs from what the majority of my constituents might feel, my responsibility as a team leader is to make sure that I advocate for what that majority wants, in a way that we all are appearing to pull in the same direction. Behind closed doors, we can sputter, we can argue, we can debate, but when the doors open up and we have a public face on, we are all rowing in the same direction. We are all trying to accomplish the same goals, which is the betterment of Tellico Village in this case. It's a great place to live. I hope that I can have a hand in making it a better place to live. Thanks.
Okay. Move to Rick.
Tellico Village is one village. We're not a bunch of separate neighborhoods. We are one. Every voice is important. Every voice that lives here and every voice that owns property here. My style is that I gather information and I listen to people, and I do it from every possible source. Village groups and organizations, individual villagers, POA staff, next door, government bodies, you name it. I don't consider it out of the ordinary to try to find their hot button. I describe this process of getting every perspective needed to make a sound decision as collaborative problem solving. It then becomes my job to apply my experience and balance the equities before I come to any conclusion about what is the best solution to any issue. You ask what I would do if my personal views differ from the majority. I know that I'm not always right, as much as I'd like to be. In that circumstance, I talk to people on both sides of the issue. I will introspectively examine my own thinking and then make the very best decision that I can make, taking all inputs into account. That's what problem solving is all about.
Thank you. Pat?
Well, what I learned the first 3 years on this board is that if you come in here and you're trying to make a name for yourself, you might as well get your volunteer pay at home, because it's like working with Sue and Carla and everybody else on this board. If you are not coming in here to argue your point, debate your point, and try to convince others to what your point is, and then reach a consensus agreement for what is the best of the community, it's not going to work. In terms of style, I'm a property owner first. I ran 3 years ago on that campaign. Decision-making over my life has evolved into a simple self-test. When I have to make a tough decision, I ask myself, does this decision remain in line with my faith, with my family, and with my job? The answer must satisfy the test without compromise. As an example, 3 years ago I was asked this question at Kahiti. I stand during the playing of the national anthem. I understand the background and choice to kneel for those who do not. I accept their position and acknowledge their right to do so. But no amount of criticism or attacks of my choice to stand will make me compromise my beliefs. My obligation as board members to understand all sides, whether the opinion is from an issue educated, meaning that they're fully aware of what they're talking about, or uneducated, whether the source is loud or whether the source is quiet or reserved. I'm the board member who responds to the next door post. I always invite feedback on my comments by inviting personal follow-up via phone call, email, or direct message. And some of those have been quite hot in the beginning, but to date, after 3 years, 100% have become friends and Tellico Village neighbors. My goal is to reach a consensus agreement that would be best for all Tellico Village, not fight for a particular group or point of view. We're a community, not segmented groups shouting down the opposition.
Thank you. We're going to turn now to quality of life. Tellico Village is rapidly growing. How should we balance the demands that come with growth with the expectation of maintaining a high quality of life? And we have 2 minutes for each of you, and we're going to start with Rick on this question.
Thank you, Ken. It goes without saying Tellico Village is growing and has been for the last several years. Over 150 new builds and significant turnover in resales for each of the last 3 years. Based on long-range planning's projections, we will approach build-out in the mid-2030s. When I came here in 2008, there were 6,000 people living in the village. Today, it's close to 9,000. Our maintenance costs will increase with growth, but so will our revenue. The infrastructure plans and agreements that we've put in place for roads, water and sewer services, and the long-range strategic plan for amenities that was adopted in 2019 will take our growth into consideration. I believe that we are in a good position looking forward as long as we constantly update our plans, not let them get stagnant, not let them lie, fallow. And we update our projections, and then we stay with the plan that we have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, turn to you, Pat.
Oh, thank you, Ken. The personal definition of quality of life, personal definition, is drastically different between property owners who moved to Tellico Village prior to 2008 and those who moved to Tellico Village after 2017. During those 9 years, we aged in place. We couldn't sell our homes or move out because other people couldn't move in. Tellico Village has been an overdeveloped, 3 golf courses, rec center, etc., underpopulated community for years. Property owners prior to 2008 recall low traffic, available boat slips, last-minute available restaurant seating, and you could walk on any golf course after 11 o'clock and play all day. Tellico Village is platted to have an estimated 12,000 to 13,000 residents at build-out. Tellico Village has changed and will continue to change. Each of us, whether we moved to Tellico Village prior to 2008 or whether we just moved in yesterday, showed the same excitement of joining this community. But again, we've changed. The behind-the-scenes quality of life is infrastructure. Life is good until a road becomes undrivable, a sewer line breaks, a water main breaks, or a facility shuts down. Lack of properly operating infrastructure causes supreme dissatisfaction immediately. Infrastructure has been and must remain a priority. Amenities are the in-your-face quality of life in Tellico Village. We moved to Tellico Village because of high ownership value and low ownership cost. But as ownership value declines and ownership cost increases, we become dissatisfied with quality of life. I'll continue to seek the best possible solutions to maintain ownership value while controlling ownership cost. And finally, we will be coming out of this pandemic. And during this pandemic, we've learned a great many lessons in scheduling and accommodating property owner needs. These lessons must be applied in future decisions.
Thanks, Pat. And then lastly, Mike.
Thanks. Quality of life is a really big issue. And I think it's big because it covers a broad spectrum of life stages. Some folks who've just recently arrived here and just recently quit working, and some of them, in fact, are still working and working from home here, are at one stage of life where they have other things that are priorities. And as we continue to age here in the village and go through those cycles that inevitably come, we'd like to know that this place that we love has a place for us to stay. So Stay in Tellico Village is a great program, and there are all sorts of housing options available here. That's a terrific thing that I think should continue, where we put focus on the opportunity for folks as they age in place in Tellico Village to be able to go through from owning a standalone home to maybe going into a townhome, to maybe going into assisted living, and still being able to be here with their friends, with their neighbors, and enjoy all that Tellico Village has to offer. So I think that's important with regard to quality of life. The other thing is that I really believe that for most of us who are living the retired life, our single greatest asset is our investment in the home that we own. And so I think it's important to maintain quality of life in Tellico, that we do everything we can to maintain and increase property values. To me, that involves 3 things primarily: taking care of the lake, taking care of the golf courses, because those 2 things are drawing people here to Tellico Village, and then taking care of the people who are currently property owners here. If you have property owners here, and you have a weekend like the one we're in right now, where we have 54 outsiders coming in to participate in 4 days of our member guest golf event, and they're getting to see the best of what Tellico Village has to offer, even under these trying times, I think that goes a long ways towards improving and maintaining our quality of life here. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, now we're going to turn to an area we've called succession planning. As the village continues to grow, the running of the POA operation will likely become more complex to manage. The board has undertaken as one of its 2020 objectives to develop an action plan for the eventual replacement of the TV POA CEO, which will likely occur the next few years. What are the key competencies you would like to see in the next CEO, general manager? And that would go to, first person would be to Pat.
Oh, me again?
You again.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Within the next few years, Tellico Village may...
2 minutes, too, by the way. 2 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So reset the clock here, Christie. You just,
Yeah,
okay.
you interrupted.
I need all the time I can get. Within the next few years, Tellico Village may very possibly enter into a talent search for 3 positions, but what we're addressing here is the potential CEO replacement, and also applies to all replacements. Our talent search should look for a person who has a demonstrated job performance of developing, training, coaching, inspiring, motivating, and holding accountable, primarily with the CEO's direct reports, but also with all staff and employees. And one of the things that our CEO must have, and this comes from my years working in the parcel industry, it's kind of a, no, I'll just explain it. You have to be a white hat, black hat kind of person. While wearing the white hat, the CEO's main objective is to provide outstanding service to all property owners. But while wearing the black hat, the CEO's goal is to demand from visitors, vendors, suppliers, or anyone who is hired to provide services to Tellico Village the highest possible service at the lowest possible cost while demanding excellence in the services provided. So, gives us, the property owners, the good old boy handshake, and holds accountable those people that we're paying. The CEO must show a demonstrated record of addressing problems and issues through resolution. Waiting for the fires to burn lower simply isn't acceptable. And just as important is the ability to forecast. We're rapidly evolving community, and solving problems as they arise is important, but being able to predict with accuracy issues before becoming problems is critical.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Mike?
Yeah, some of the qualities that I would like to see in those folks who will succeed our top-level administrators. Obviously, the first one is experience. I would love to see someone who has experience managing a village or other entity of this size and a comparable makeup. No 2 places are the same, but there are some who are similar, and I think that experience is important. I would like to see someone who is invested in Tellico Village personally. To me, that means they have some skin in the game. Do they own property in the village? Do they live in the village? Are they here among the folks that they are managing every day? I would also like to see an open competition. And I know we have qualified personnel here within the village, but promoting within shouldn't be an automatic thing. I think you go outside, you recruit, you look for people who have the qualities that the board feels are most important, and then you have an open competition. If internal candidates are able to survive and advance through an open competition, more power to them. That's best for Tellico Village. I think it's important that they be leaders with a team vision, that they put Tellico first, that they are accountable to the property owners, and that they are proactive and are able to identify issues before they hit the forefront and respond in an appropriate way to those. That's some of the skills I would look for.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Rick, your turn.
Yeah, Ken, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. 3 years ago, I was critical of the POA for its lack of attention to this. As a board member, I've taken a lead role in not only succession planning, but also developing organizational strategies for the future. Do we have the right organization in place? This involves organization analysis, compensation management, employee development, and a high-level executive recruiting experience. I have a great deal of experience doing exactly those things. Plus, I have the legal background to handle contractual matters. Your question focuses on the CEO, but there are others that are just as important that must be planned for. I've worked on developing position and recruiting specs for a number of key positions in the POA. Since you asked specifically about the CEO, it is clear that this individual needs to have a strong financial and strategic planning background. The candidate needs to be a team builder, and they need to have CI and Kaizen training. They need to be a capable developer and evaluator of talent. Experience as a city manager or running a resort community with a full public works responsibility is an absolute must.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to turn now to the area of environmental quality. And the question is, Tellico Village is a beautiful place to live. How do we maintain and improve our environmental quality? As one example, the lake is increasingly impacted by runoff from homes. What role, if any, should the POA board do to reduce this and other environmental impacts? In 4 minutes, and Mike, you're up first.
Thanks, Ken. Being a recent home builder in Tellico Village, I'm pretty intimately aware of some of the requirements, including having to have a drainage plan. It's signed off on by the ACC, and I've had experience with meeting other requirements, which I think are great. We got to have some conformity, some uniformity when it comes to those things, okay? However, I do have some issues with consistent application and enforcement of those things. It's my belief that once the POA through the ACC signs off on a drainage plan, then the ACC POA takes some responsibility for the results of that. I have several neighbors and friends who have encountered issues after having signed off on a drainage plan when there were subsequent drainage issues, and then the ACC would come back to them and say, you're going to be responsible for that. I'm not sure that's the best way to advocate for our property owners. It is important that we have those plans in place. It is important that, as I said, one of the key things is taking care of the lake. People come here for that resource. People come here for the golf course. And so managing the golf courses, managing the lake, whether it's runoff, chemical runoff from the golf courses, drainage runoff from development of properties, a possible invasion of Asian carp. We need to address those issues to maintain the high quality of life, the high quality of environment that we currently have here in Tellico Village. Now, there are people who are going to have differences of opinion about aesthetics. You like one thing, I don't like another thing. Those things are always going to take place, and I don't necessarily think of those as environmental quality. I think of them as a little more aesthetic, and they're personal. I'm particularly concerned because the area where I live in Milwaukee is one of the faster growing neighborhoods in the village now. It's still pretty heavily wooded, but as development there increases, I have those same concerns that many other homeowners in the village have. That house doesn't have certain kind of windows on the front exposure. Where's this driveway, where's the runoff going to be? Why is there not drainage in front of the house here, but there is in these other 2 or 3? So, I think those are growing pains when a community is growing like ours is, that we're going to have to suffer through a little bit. Having plans in place, which we do, is important. But I think it's really important that we look after the consistent and respectful application of those plans and make sure we're treating all of our property owners fairly in doing so. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Rick, you have 4 minutes.
Okay. The POA has already taken a role in promoting environmental preservation. The newly adopted mission, values, and guiding principles make it clear that the POA board and staff must not only protect, but improve our natural and man-made environments by making them a key part of every single decision that we make. I worked on the Blue Book revision for close to a year. It was a painful process. But that new Blue Book does contain provisions that require engineered drainage plans, not just the opinion of somebody that sits on the ACC. They require an engineered plan. And, oh, by the way, when the house is built, there'll be a final inspection that includes that engineer saying, yep, that's there. And we'll take photographs so that we know it's there. So that later on, when the landscaper comes in and changes all of the drainage swales, we'll know whose responsibility it is. We've also added inspection personnel to enforce the new rules in the Blue Book. In January, I instructed the ACC to form an ad hoc committee to develop what's now going to be called the Green Book to address environmental concerns. One of the things that they are working on deal with runoff affecting the lake. And in fact, one of the people that is leading that effort is a fairly high-placed person in the water organization. I expect them to complete that work in the very near future, and we will come forward with environmental recommendations for the future, because it's all about what the future is.
Thanks, Rick. Pat?
Thanks, Rick. You just took about half of what I was going to say. But anyway.
Well, that won't prevent you anyway.
No, it won't. So here we go. As stated earlier, the board proposed, as Rick was talking about, and approved the 2 additional ACC inspectors this year because, as Mike said, we were having a great deal of difficulty enforcing what the Blue Book said. And we also have the potential, with justification, of adding 3 more in 2021. Removing undergrowth during construction significantly impacts water runoff and drainage, which eventually ends up in the lake. The required, as Rick talked about, third-party engineered drainage and runoff plans being followed from the start of construction through landscape completion with documentation and photographs will greatly impact neighbor, village, and lake environments. Your POA has no authority to police or fine property owners who incorrectly apply chemicals, herbicides, or irrigate their properties, thus the Green Book. Your POA does have the responsibility and obligations to inform, educate property owners on environmental issues. This information may be presented to property owners in the form of wasteful cost analysis, again back to the Green Book, educating contractors and lawn services, again back to the Green Book, or for extreme cases, a personal contact. But ultimately, the responsibility falls to each of us. Overwatering, over-fertilizing, improper use of herbicides, and if you read next door, tossing trash out a car window, improper disposal of cigarette butts, and proper disposal of pet waste is our personal responsibility. We must hold ourselves to a higher level of community stewardship, leave it better than we found it.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, we return to a topic question which Mike mentioned a few minutes ago. That's in Asian carp. So here's the question. We are all concerned over the potential threat to our lake posed by Asian carp. While the POA board has taken visible action this year to focus on the Asian carp problem, there are still many questions, concerns by homeowners, as no concrete actions have taken place or been announced. In your opinion, are there any other actions the board should be doing regarding this threat? And you have 2 minutes, and Rick, you're up first.
Okay. Asian carp is certainly a concern for the board, as it is for every Tellico villager. Our property values are threatened by the Asian carp. Last January, before we even finalized our 2020 goals, recognizing the issue, we established the board's Asian carp committee to work on this issue. We've met with community leaders to rally them to the cause. We've mounted a letter-writing campaign. We've lobbied government bodies and individual politicians at every level. Recently, Governor Lee announced that he was establishing an Asian Carp Commission. I have written to our state representative, Lowell Russell, urging him to support naming a Tellico Village resident with impeccable credentials to this important group, and he has agreed to do so. I believe that our message needs to be supportive of barriers at TVA dams, and that dollars that we spend should not be spent on mitigation, but on prevention.
Thank you. Pat?
Okay. All property owners have a vested interest in the cost, environmental, ecological, and recreational impact that Asian carp will have on Tellico Village. But what we've all learned in this research and living with this problem for the last couple of years, Tellico Village does not have the authority to close locks, halt river traffic, or build barriers ourselves. We do need and must continue and keep our elected officials and government agencies informed of our concerns, as Rick was saying. It is paramount that we do so. If you've not read the Asian carp information on the Tellico Village website, please do so. Follow the suggestions on the website to write letters to those officials and organizations listed, then write them again, and then pick up the phone and call them, and write them again. The board action through our Government Affairs Committee, and most important, though seemingly unrelated, is vote. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Liberal, or Conservative is not the issue. The issue is that those running for office and those in office look for the numbers. When Tellico Village boasts a population of 8,500 to 9,000 people and votes less than 2,000 in an election, our voice is diminished. Our elected officials listen to us by our vote count. Doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Liberal, or Conservative. They look at how many of us are voting. Our efforts to keep Asian carp out of the Upper Tennessee River will be impacted by our voice, and our voice is our vote. Our concerns being addressed through communication and our combined voice supporting election and re-election campaign efforts. They will listen if we speak loudly enough through our vote totals.
Thank you, Pat. Mike, 2 minutes?
Thanks. I'm glad, Pat, that, and I know you've been working extensively on the Asian carp issue in your role with the POA board, but I'm glad that you mentioned voting and participation in government. That is a critical piece of addressing this problem, because the invasion of Asian carp is bigger than the capabilities of Tellico Village alone. To that end, earlier this year, several leaders in Tellico Village, including myself as president of New Villagers, Ken Litke as president of the HOA, Rick Blau as president of the POA, received an invitation to sit down over lunch with Congressman Tim Burchett to discuss what ways he could help Tellico Village. POA and HOA presidents opted out of that luncheon opportunity. I did not. On August 21st, I had lunch for about 2 hours with Congressman Burchett. We had lengthy discussions with several other folks from around the village about the Asian carp problem. 4 days later, he was in Washington, D.C., on the floor at Congress, making an impassioned plea for funding, which resulted in the securing of a commitment for $25 million towards this issue, addressing the Asian carp. It still needs to be approved by the Senate, but it's a push in the right direction. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure when the opportunity presents itself that we speak not only through our vote, but through our personal involvement as leaders in this community with our local, state, and federal elected government officials.
I'm going to respond to that.
Okay.
I was invited to that meeting. I declined because I had other priorities that I had to attend to. And frankly, I have met with Congressman Burchett more than once, and we have discussed the Asian carp situation at length. And the $25 million was already in the hopper.
Okay. So let's move to another topic.
Well, my feelings are hurt. I wasn't invited to that lunch.
All right. Okay, we're going to turn to a very important topic, I'm sure, in all our minds right now, COVID-19. Based upon Tellico Village demographics, we are very much the definition of an at-risk population. Fortunately, the current POA board has taken a strong leadership role in managing the risk of COVID-19 in Tellico Village, working to stay aligned with the state and CDC guidelines. With relaxation of Tennessee restrictions, but local rising infection rates and forecasts of higher rates with colder weather driving people indoors, in your opinion, what else should the POA board do, if anything, to keep residents safe while also allowing for an active lifestyle? And this is, Pat, you're up first, 3 minutes.
Thank you. None of us property owners moved to Tellico Village to hole up at home. This pandemic has really thrown a wrench in the social networking and social fabric of Tellico Village. And with this pandemic, the terms socially active and safe do not go well together. In fact, during this pandemic, socially active and safe are opposing issues. The POA board, POA staff, and all property owners know the guidelines, whether we wear a mask or not, social distance or not, sit 10 to a table or 2 to a table, whether we attend large events, participate in meetings, or follow prescribed governmental or local personal rules is ultimately up to each of us. We've all heard and been involved in the endless debates and opinions supplied by every expert imaginable, and this will continue long after this pandemic is over. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? I believe we're all educated in the pandemic's do's and don'ts and whys. Your POA has done its utmost to follow the rules, garnered an equal amount of criticism and garnering an equal amount of praise for doing so. The POA will continue to follow mandated guidelines and restrictions. You, me, and all property owners must make our own compliance choices. As an example, the guidelines have been reduced that will allow us to open our very popular tiki bar. There will be guidelines published. I will not attend due to my choice of avoiding crowds, but I respect your choice to attend. Understand that the rules of compliance are provided for us to follow. You, I, everyone else has to respect these rules, comply, or make the choice not to attend.
Thanks, Pat. Mike?
Yeah, glad you asked this question. As you know, as president of New Villagers, my board and I kind of took the lead in re-engaging our membership socially with our community. And that was a difficult choice and one that met with some resistance as we kind of felt our way through this thing. But I agree with Pat. It is up to us. I think the POA has done a very good job in making sure that in the general operations of our village, we comply with those standards that are established by the Tennessee Pledge and the CDC. I don't think, in my opinion, that it is up to the POA to make other choices on behalf of its villagers. I have great faith in my friends, neighbors, and fellow villagers here in Tellico Village. We are all intelligent, well-educated, responsible, respectful people. We don't want to get COVID-19. We don't want to give it to anyone else. Because of that, I believe that in re-engaging our community socially, if we establish guidelines for events, whether it's Tiki or a New Villagers Social or an HOA event, if we establish reasonable guidelines and expectations for those events that are within the Tennessee Pledge and CDC guidelines, if we clearly communicate those guidelines and expectations to our memberships and fellow community members, and then we trust them, because no one knows better than each of us what our own circumstances are and the levels of risk that we can or cannot accept. It's different for everyone. So my personal opinion, I would like to see the guidelines for given events set down, communicated clearly, and then empower each one of you to make the decision for yourself. I will attend, I will not attend, based on your own interpretation of the levels of risk that you can accept and tolerate. It's not our place to tell others what to do. It's our place to set guidelines and parameters and allow others to make those responsible, respectful choices. Thanks.
Okay. Rick?
When I introduced myself earlier, I suggested that this was not the greatest year to be board president. because dealing with COVID-19 has fallen to me to lead. And yes, our population is vulnerable. Our average age is north of 60, and we have many with underlying medical conditions. As board president, my leadership in this was by communicating early and often, researching government guidance, and making sure the board and staff members understood the requirements as we worked to reopen our venues after the mandated shutdowns of April and May. It's a delicate balancing act. We must practice heightened levels of sanitation, which come with extreme cost. We have to enforce sometimes unpopular government guidelines, and we have to allow folks to safely re-engage when they're comfortable doing so. It's not our choice. This requires that everybody acts in a responsible manner in making their decisions to protect not only themselves, but their neighbors. Well, we have no way of knowing for sure about cases in the village because they don't share it that way. Self-reports and anecdotal evidence suggest that Tellico Village is about the safest place in either Loudoun or Monroe counties. I believe that this is a testament to how we've handled this.
Okay, thank you. Going to move in the area of subsidies. Tellico Village has historically chosen to subsidize some amenities while not subsidizing others. What is your position on this? Do you think we'll always have subsidies, or will they eventually go away? And you have 3 minutes for this, and we're going to start with Mike.
Thanks. I think subsidies play an important role in a community like Tellico Village. I would like to see them go away. We subsidize certain activities here. One of the problems that I find with subsidies is they are a disincentive to continually improving performance. And one of the things that we've talked about here today is an emphasis on continuous improvement in Tellico Village. I think if you take a subsidy and you attach it to critical metrics, performance metrics, that you can more easily justify having it, or have a schedule whereby that subsidy gradually declines and goes away. But it's really important that we take a close look at subsidies. We subsidize our food service here. I've heard a lot of complaints and comments from fellow villagers who said, from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, the quality of the food, the quality of the service is not consistent. I'd like to see the menus change. I would like, a bunch of different things. And it's just, people talk because they want folks who are in leadership positions to know. And I think that's important feedback to get. But if we're constantly subsidizing food service and not incentivizing improvement in those programs, then I think we have an issue. I'll take a look at Tokwa Bar and Grill, for example. We have a great facility there. We're on our third general manager at that facility in a space of 2 months. To me, that's symptomatic of a larger problem. I can't put my finger on what that is, but when you have 3 leaders in that area in the space of 2 months, there's an issue. I'd like to find out what that is. I think subsidies might have something to do with it. I think if we make our food service more responsive to continuous improvement, that subsidy could eventually go away. Golf gets subsidized. I'm a big golf fan. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the 3 golf courses. And I think it's important to subsidize golf, but at the same time, I think we need to look for economies of scale, for efficiencies, for ways in which we can reduce what we are spending and not just focus on increasing golf revenues. The two go hand in hand. If you focus on the revenue and expense side, that way you can reduce your subsidies and you can more easily approach balancing a budget. Thanks.
Okay. Rick?
Tellico Village has about $22 million in assessment and user fee revenue. This is the money that we use to run the village. We also have costs of nearly 80% of that to maintain what we have, including 120 miles of roads and our water and sewer system, and to deliver all of our programs. Golf and rec user fees don't cover the costs of providing those amenities. The balance is the subsidy, which has to come out of assessments. The Tanasi and Tokwa restaurants, and I need to correct you here, do not operate with the subsidy. There is no subsidy paid to the operator of those two restaurants. The Kahiti Grill does have a small subsidy, but that's due largely to the fact that the Kahiti population is smaller. It's certainly not based on their usage. At the yacht club, we were working towards a zero subsidy, and then COVID hit us and upset the apple cart. Hopefully, we can get back on track in 2021. Our docks are not subsidized. The original investment was in the millions, mostly financed by POA debt, but that is now repaid. As a result, docks are priced on a competitive basis and are in fact much lower than other area marinas. 30% of the dock revenue goes into the dock reserve for future needs, and that number is reevaluated every single budget cycle. As a board, we should always look for ways to reduce our subsidies. However, our amenities support all of our property values, and we need to maintain them in first-class condition to protect those property values. When I moved here, I was happy to support even those amenities that I don't use personally. I doubt that there will be a point where we will ever get to a zero subsidy. However, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be an aspirational goal.
Okay, Pat, your turn.
Thanks. A couple of times I've referred to as overbuilt, underpopulated. If when in 2017 or 2007, Allison, I moved here, if you'd been the business model for this neighborhood, you would not have had 3 golf courses with 5,000 people. And it's going to be that way forever. But first, agreeing with what these gentlemen says, I'm providing you with a hardline approach to subsidies. I apologize if this offends you, but Tellico Village inherited this concept of pay to play, and we have made it work. Every restaurant, gym, golf course, etc., that property owners frequent outside of Tellico Village does nothing to reduce subsidies. Understanding that property owners will not stop frequenting outside restaurants, gym, and golf courses is unrealistic, and it's not going to happen. But if you want it to go away, you got to pay to play. That's the way it works. We've been and continue to be an overdeveloped, underpopulated community, yet we're rapidly approaching that equalization with our population. Our history shows that we manage our finances towards keeping subsidies low, yet our history also shows that we have had very little involvement in marketing our facilities and providing an ideal pricing model to attract more property owners to amenities. You just saw in the board where we just set a record level of golf rounds for the last month, 14,000 rounds, but 7,000 of those rounds were PM golf, which is new. It is a new marketing strategy. There are areas within each of our amenity pricing models that can generate immediate revenue increases. But believe me when I say, I'm talking about PM golf and 60% 9-hole again, believe me when I say there'll be pushback from the users of those amenities, not so much from the pricing model changes, but from the cultural changes that will be required. We can no longer, we the property owners can no longer say, do this like we always have. In order to reduce subsidies, we all must change, and change is not appreciated. I will propose in my next term and be willing to work with, if I'm not elected, a POA board ad hoc committee to research, communicate, and implement for the 2022 budget a revenue generation model that will generate maximum revenue, maximum yield, and maximum participation while maintaining property owner value and property costs. And there are 4 areas that we can almost pick up $500,000 immediately. But it's gonna feel weird, and we're not gonna like it as property owners. Done.
Thank you,
Pat just volunteered for a board goal next year.
There you go. If I'm elected. Otherwise, I'm
That
not
will give
around.
it to you anyway.
Okay, we're going to turn to the last question that we had sent to the candidates. and it's in the areas of new amenities. The current 10-year plan does not feature any new amenities in it. In your opinion, how should new amenities come about and be paid for? Should all new amenities be self-funded, not from assessments, but only via homeowner contributions and user fees? Or should the POA board or its advisory committees be promoting new amenities? And if yes, what do you think would be some good examples of amenity opportunities for the future? And we have 2 minutes for this question, and Rick, you're up first.
Equipment replacement, maintenance, and infrastructure projects all compete with amenities for dollars. Amenities are typically built using reserves, debt, or some combination of the two. In 2019, we completed the largest capital program since the Wellness Center, replacing the Tokwa Clubhouse and building the Kahidi Activity Center. That took nearly all of our amenity reserve funds. Additionally, we had a major road program that took a big chunk out of the R&M reserves. Starting in 2020, a key board goal was to rebuild the reserves and take them to 30% of our total asset value, which is a generally accepted standard for reserve accumulation. As you know, we are presently working on the budget for 2021, plus the 10-year plan. Based on what we're seeing, we should hit our reserves target in 2025 or 6. In the meantime, we are still spending on amenities. A few examples being considered are $500,000 for Kahidi bunker renovation in 21 and 2, $30,000 in 21 to complete the Tanasi bunker renovation, $10,000 in 21 to extend the Tokwa range pad, $125,000 in 22 for the new paved walking path at the Wellness Center, $200,000 in both 21 and 22 to build new docks. Proposals for new amenities come to the board through our advisory committees based on their assessment of desirability. The board does needs and competitive analysis and slots promising projects into the long-range strategic plan based on its assessment of available funding. Self-funding through the Timeless Teleco Foundation is a way to move a project forward in the long-range plan, much like what is currently happening with the new pickleball complex and what was done with the Kahidi Clubhouse portico using private funding. So you see that we are addressing amenities, we're building reserves, and we're providing an alternative vehicle for funding amenity development, and we're doing all of this at the same time.
Thanks. Pat?
Okay. He covered all of the amenity opportunity for the future I was going to, and I guess we could throw in there croquet but I mean, new amenities. I believe in 2020 with 8,500 to 9,000 residents, along with record home sales, along with record new homes being built, and again, being an overbuilt and underpopulated. Boy, I burned that up today. All new amenities must be self-supporting. It's the responsibility of the POA, all property owners, all of us, to determine a new amenity and implement the new amenity. If a group wishes to plan, which Rick talked about, pickleball and Kahidi portico, if they wish to plan and implement a new amenity through fundraising, I applaud that effort. But to build a new amenity that is not self-supporting adds to each property owner's assessment by being subsidized by us all. And I'm talking new amenity like I want a bocce ball court or new pickleball courts or that kind of thing. If it's in the plan, the POA's got the responsibility to do it. If we want it above and beyond that, then by all means, fundraising and whatever. A continuation of our past culture of overbuilt and underpopulation subsidization is not acceptable. Done.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah. You know, in the movie Field of Dreams, they said, if you build it, they will come. I don't think that's a good model for amenities. Someone gets an idea in their head, we ought to have a croquet court or a bocce lawn. I'm not even sure if that's what's called, a lawn for bocce, and says, hey, let's build that, and then people will come to it. I'm going to piggyback on what Pat said. I believe that new amenities, and they're great to have, but they should be user-driven. My understanding, for example, is there were a bunch of kayakers in the village who were transporting kayaks from their homes down to the lake and back again, said, hey, we'd really like to have a kayak storage facility on the water. And they were told, okay, You find 32, 36, I forget how many kayaks one of those facilities holds, people who are willing to commit X amount of dollars up front in order to be able to have that facility. And once you have secured that commitment from those folks, we will go ahead and build that amenity. It looks to me like that's working out pretty well. So I don't believe we should build it and hope they come. I believe it should be driven by the users. And whatever the next new big thing is, whether it's pickleball or I don't even know because it hasn't come along yet, but there will be something. It should be driven by the users. And if those people are motivated to get that in place and other people will follow along, that's great. But I don't think it's something we invest funds in up front, hoping that others will follow. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've come to the end of our prepared questions, but we have had some questions coming in through the chat. So I'm going to look and ask one of the questions. It may take, it's a pretty big question, but I think it's important in a lot of people's minds. So let's give 2 minutes for each person to try to answer this one. But what is the board going to do about the following areas? We pay millions of dollars in property taxes in Loudoun County and get nothing for it. And Pat, you're up.
Well, I think I addressed that earlier, and it was kind of surprising to me when I became a board member and participated in and watched the sequence of events between Loudoun Monroe, TRDA, and the POA board. There is an animosity there that goes back a long, long time. And from my perspective, it wasn't worth the time for me to find out the who, what, when, where, and why. It was to find out what the solution was going to be. So what I did is I reached out because I'd gone to church with one guy, I'd played golf with another leader there, and I called him up, and we started having lunch. And we started talking about those. The first 5 meetings that we had was how much they disliked Tellico Village and how uppity we are, on and on and on. And after we got to the 6th meeting, I'm saying, well, guys, you've got on me, but why don't you contribute to? And then we went through a list of things. They couldn't give an answer other than you're a 501c4. Well, that's not a good reason, because when you go into the Tennessee state statutes, you find out that a 501c4 can be supported by the state, and this board, through our attorneys looking through that. This adversarial relationship has to change, and what really baffles me is that, and again, I mentioned it earlier, there is a profound accountability from the property owners to the board, to the POA staff on accounting for every assessment dollar. But when you say you're paying almost that much to the state or to the Loudoun County through your property taxes, it's like, well, okay, we're not an incorporated city, so I'll just forgive them for that. That's not acceptable, folks. And that's why I want back on this board. That is my unfinished goal. We have to get that solved. Thank you, Chrissy. My time's up.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I've had conversations with a lot of people about this issue because I've heard a number thrown around that Tellico Village contributes something like $9 million annually in tax revenue to Loudoun County. And we don't get anything or almost nothing back for that. And the question that always comes up as well, if you want to get those tax dollars back, incorporate. The problem then is if you incorporate, you lose some measures of control over what you can do in your village. So it becomes a balancing act of, do we want to give up some control to get some of that in return, or don't we? I think in this particular case, this, like most problems, and Pat alluded to it, starts with relationships and communication. We have to be better at our relationships with local government entities, whether it's sitting down over a lunch, whether it's collaborating over an issue that impacts both Loudoun and Tellico Village, or Lenoir City and Tellico Village. Those things will help to advance the relationship that should lead to a more collaborative, cooperative effort on everybody's part. But it's still going to boil down to, a lot of it's going to boil down to, the incorporate, don't incorporate question. Personally, I like the unincorporated model. But if you want to get a bunch more of that tax money coming back to Tellico Village, incorporation might be something to think about.
rebuttal of what? or-
No, I would just like to tag on before I know what he's going to say.
Why don't we give?
Yeah, okay, go
We
ahead.
might be stealing from Rick's, no, let's let Rick talk.
Hey, I got to tell you, I've told people, look at a map of Loudoun County, and where Tellico Village is, you're going to see a great big pink piggy bank. We give the county $8.5 to $9 million every year in property taxes and get virtually nothing in return. So the board has taken a different tack. The tack is that we're lobbying Nashville. What we want Nashville to do is say a 501c4 mutual benefit corporation, which is what we are, should be treated like a city. We're kind of a special case. And we've been successful in some regards. We've gotten tax relief on purchases. We've gotten a liquor license. And we have a couple of other biggies out there that we're looking for. One is limited liability that a city gets. We buy $17 million worth of insurance. A city is limited to $350,000. So what we want is to be treated like we're a city, but not have to go through the process of becoming one. There's a good reason that since 1993, when they changed the incorporation law in Tennessee, that not one single new city has been established. It is a very, very onerous process, which we have researched extensively.
Are you going to clarify one of their comments? or-
Yeah, I just want to make a comment to anybody that's listening, and when you go out and you talk to the commissioners, or you talk to an elected official, and you're talking to them about incorporation, they're going to give you 9,000 reasons why you can, and we've already come up with all the reasons why you can't. Ask that elected official a question. It's a simple question, and I can already give you the answer. Ask them the question about if Tellico Village incorporates, what about Kahiti? Ask them the question. They're going to tell you the standard answer is, that's your problem. That's not right.
Okay.
That is their standard answer.
I think we may have time for one short more question from via chat. What is your position regarding having a city planner on the POA board, or as a contract employee to make decisions for the present and more importantly for the future? And let's try to keep that just 1 minute if you can. And Mike first.
I'm going to assume that we're talking about adding another layer of administration, a compensated layer of administration. Just off the cuff, my impression of that question would be the time for a city planner for Tellico Village has long since passed. I mean, we've been established, we're continuing to grow and evolve. City planning is something that takes place at the beginning of the development of a community like ours. So right on its surface, I don't think a city planner is anything that we would really benefit from.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with that, Mike. A city planner on the board is going to cost us probably $100,000 to $200,000 a year. And frankly, I'm not sure what benefit it brings to us. As Mike pointed out, we're well down the road to development. As a matter of fact, we're looking in the face of build-out in the next 15 to 20 years. So we have to have more of a strategic focus, and that's why it's so important that we hire the right person to be the next CEO of Tellico Village, and why we're working so hard on that.
Okay. Pat?
And I go along with the same thing, but I also want to add, there's a utilization of the staff that you have now. And I'm sorry, Mitzi, but our staff is more than qualified to step into that role and do those jobs without adding that additional cost. And if you offered email questions, if we're not answering the question right, could they rephrase it and send it?
Okay. All right. I think to allow time for to make sure you have time for your closing statements, I'd like to just to thank everybody who submitted questions through chat. We can record all those, and we'll get them to the panel, the candidates, and we'll get responses posted. So again, thank you for a lot of questions here. So at this point, let's move to to the closing summary remarks that each of you like to make. And Mike, why don't we start with you?
That would be fine. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Ken. I would start my closing remarks by saying that I know and have worked with both Pat and Rick, and they are great guys. I would never, ever be critical of anyone who steps into such a demanding role, volunteering their time and energies for the improvement of a community like the one that we live in. I think that's something that we all have a moral and ethical obligation to do to make our community better. So I appreciate their efforts on the board. What I am saying is that every organization has problems that they face. They come up all the time. I'm fond of the expression, if you do what you've always done, you will get what you've always gotten. In the real world, in our work lives, when you encountered a difficult situation you needed some help with, you would go out and you would talk to people. And sometimes you'd get stuck on a problem. Many times when that happens, the best thing to do is to step away from it or to ask someone else who has not been looking at that problem to look at it with fresh eyes. I am not better than these guys are. I am different. I'm a fresh set of eyes. This election is an opportunity. I got involved for a couple of reasons, primarily. One is my compulsion to give back to my community. But the other one is, when you have an election with 2 seats and 2 candidates, it's not an election at all. So just by my involvement, at least you folks, our friends, our neighbors, our fellow village members, have an opportunity to listen to the 3 of us and to make a choice. And I am fine with the will of those folks. But I'm glad to be able to provide an opportunity for you to ask questions, to get feedback, to choose. And if I haven't covered something that you'd like to know more about, one of the ways that I hope to communicate with my constituents is directly through email. I've established a Gmail account, Blackwell, the number 4, tvpoa@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me, and I will do my level best to get back to you in a timely manner. Keeping in mind, I am also a villager like you, and I involve myself in other things as well. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to the election. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Pat, would you go next?
Yeah, I want to reemphasize, Rick and I both, I think we're both very excited that, Mike, you joined the fray here. 'Cause we didn't want to just be reappointed. I think it's critical that this type forum is held every year and that people get to ask the questions and they get to see and listen to the candidates. But in my summary, I found the 9 questions that were provided very interesting. Referring to the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee survey, the number 1 most important item identified by property owners was the financial stability of Tellico Village. And though many of the questions today touched on the financial aspects, the question was not directly addressed. But as a result of that survey, the board has been providing much more information regarding financials published in the Telegram, the Connection, and the quarterly newsletters. Tellico Village has a limited financial resource, and you've heard us all talk about it today. Only assessments, hookup fees, or et cetera, generate revenue. Pay-to-play amenity fees generate additional revenue offsetting costs that associate with particular amenities. And after serving for 3 years as a board member, I've come to appreciate the levels your POA board, staff, and advisory committees have achieved maintaining and growing our financial stability. Being in our great financial condition is a security blanket that we cannot afford to ignore. Nothing would destroy this community faster than financial insecurity. Keeping Tellico Village in a great financial position is top utmost priority. At this level, we can maintain our quality of life and financial security. Without the great financial position of today, we would see personal property values decline, quality of life deteriorate, and retirement happiness and comfort decline. Property owners, you and I, may not agree or like decisions made by your POA board, but 35 plus years of good financial decisions have made Tellico Village what it is today, and we chose to move here. It is critical that the board members you elect understand the impact of financial stability on infrastructure, amenities, reserves, wants, needs, and the impact these items have on the current and future social fabric of Tellico Village. In my opinion, you have a hard choice in selecting two of these three candidates. All of us will do you well. And I ask that you look at my performance over the past 3 years, talk to your neighbors who know me, and make your personal evaluation, because I would be proud to serve you another 3 years.
Thank you, Pat. And we'll conclude with Rick.
First of all, I want to thank the Homeowners Association for hosting this event and all of the great work from TVB for putting it on. The HOA is an organization that provides great service to the community, and I'm proud to have been a board member for 6 years, including one as its president. You're not the only former HOA president in the room. Yeah. Each of us came to Tellico Village for a variety of reasons. The lake, the natural beauty of the area, championship caliber golf, first-class amenities, a myriad of activities promoting an active lifestyle, and of course, the people. All of this binds us together, creating the vibrant social fabric, which is the Tellico Village brand. You have heard me say this. It is a board member's job to protect that brand, and by so doing, position us for the future. No single board member does that alone. It requires the ability to listen to others, visualize the future, formulate strategic directions, and build teams and coalitions that produce that future. As a board member, everything I have done has been driven by two principles: to manage the POA like the business that it truly is, and to build a solid future for Tellico Village. If you re-elect me to the POA board, I will focus on these principles every day, and I'll be motivated to make this wonderful place that we all call home the very best that it can be. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I want to thank the candidates for being here and answering some very tough questions in a very thoughtful manner. To everyone listening, as I mentioned earlier, this forum has been taped and will be available shortly for viewing again if you want to catch it again, and or tell people who missed it to be sure to watch it. We cover a lot of great topics here. Okay, so it may be on your mind, when and how do you vote in the POA election? So, in case you were wondering, October 29th, the election materials will be mailed out, and the voting starts on November 1. And the election opens on VoteNet or by paper ballot, and it concludes November 19th. So you have a period of time to vote. And we talked about earlier, it's important that you vote. Vote in this, vote in national elections, but make your voice heard. Hopefully we informed you today, what you saw, and you can make an educated vote during that period of time. On November 20th, they will announce the election results, and then they send it to the board of directors for certification, and on December 16th, they certify the results and announce new board members. So that is the schedule. So that concludes our forum. Again, thank you for all the work by the volunteers that put this on. This village runs on volunteers, and the biggest volunteers I think we have in the village are the board members. So we appreciate what you guys do for all of us. And that concludes, and thank you for watching.